Welcome to Grounded Wellness, your go-to podcast for simplified and trusted information on how to live a more non-toxic and holistic life. We're your hosts. I'm Bethany McDaniel, founder of Primally Pure, biohacking enthusiast and mom of 3.
And I'm Courtney O'Connor, a holistic esthetician with over 15 years experience in the healing power of touch and holistic skincare rituals.
In today's episode, I am so excited to welcome our friend Taylor Dukes, functional medicine nurse practitioner. 2 years ago, Taylor was faced with a shocking and life-altering cancer diagnosis. She utilized a number of different alternative practices and treatments in addition to surgery to heal. In fact, she even shrunk her brain tumor in half without chemo or radiation. Taylor has such a heart for helping others experience deep healing and also providing approachable advice on diet and lifestyle. Her story is one that you will never forget. Let's dig in. Hey everyone, welcome back to Grounded Wellness. We are here with Taylor Dukes, my good friend and functional medicine provider, and we're switching things up today. We're having Taylor Dukes Wellness lemonade mixed with matcha green tea. Cheers! Cheers! Okay, so just to give everyone some background, Taylor and I have known each other for a while now. We met through our mutual friend, Allison Evans, who is one of the Branch Basics co-founders. And I know your story very well at this point, but I'm so excited to talk to you about it in even more detail and to share it with our community.
I'm so honored to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Getting into your background a little bit, we know that you're traditionally trained as a nurse practitioner, but before we get into your story, give us the cliff notes on why you transitioned to functional medicine after spending time in the world of conventional medicine.
So I always say, and people need to understand what conventional and functional or integrative holistic medicine is. In the conventional medical model, it's our traditional doctors, care providers, nurse practitioners, nurses, and we're really good at diagnosing things as far as coming up with a name for symptoms, and we have prescriptions and we have diagnostic procedures, but you don't really ask the why question of like, why is this happening? And so that's the conventional world. It's really, really great for trauma, emergency situations, but then the holistic, integrative, kind of functional side of care is more getting to the root cause and asking the why question. Like, yeah, you have all these symptoms, but why? And so I got into this field not because I was smart, but because I was sick. And I always say a lot of my colleagues that got into this world, we didn't get into it because we're like, let's be a trailblazer and be healthy and be different. We don't learn this in school. We get into it because we're sick and we're desperate, and the medical system usually fails us. And that was my story. And so I was sick, and that's how I got into it.
Okay, so what happened all those years ago? How did you get sick? How did you get better? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I was a healthy kid growing up. I grew up and my mom was very healthy. She had home cooked meals, I was a traditional college kid and, liked to eat out and do the whole fast food thing, but I never had health issues. And then after I graduated from nursing school, I had the opportunity to do some medical mission trips abroad in both Africa and Ecuador. And I started getting sick abroad. And I would have little symptoms like, my stomach wasn't well, and I would just be like, oh, that's traveler's diarrhea, that's normal. Take my Cipro that my doctor prescribed, which is an antibiotic to treat, traveler's diarrhea. But it was all these little things kept adding up. And because I was there for a longer period of time, I just kept getting sicker and sicker. And then when I was in Ecuador, it was like getting to the point where I couldn't function. I couldn't eat without being in pain. And I ultimately ended my time there on that kind of medical mission trip and got flown home to the States. And that's when I think I realized I've always been really positive and kind of like a power through kind of person. And I couldn't, I couldn't. And it was so confusing because I was never the sick kid growing up. So yeah, I just had a lot of symptoms. I had tons of stomach issues. My skin was a wreck. I never had preteen acne, but I had inflamed cystic acne in my face, and I had joint pain. I didn't even know what my joints were. I'm like, you're not supposed to feel your joints at 22 years old. And I had terrible joint pain. I had days where I couldn't get out of bed. It was debilitating, and my hair was falling out. I just had a myriad of symptoms. And so I was going from specialist to specialist, doctor to doctor, and just kind of bouncing around. They'd all do different, well, let's order this test. This looks fine. So let's move to this. We'll do this intervention. Let's do a colonoscopy. We'll start you on this medicine. And I felt convicted because here I am. I'm like a nurse, I'm a trained RN at this point, registered nurse. And my whole job and the purpose of my life is to advocate for my patients. And I can't advocate for myself. I was just lost going from doctor to doctor. And then I started to feel crazy because I'm like, well, they say it's normal. And looking back, I'm like, none of it was normal, but they just didn't have reasons or answers for me. So they were just shuffling out, let's try this prescription. Well, let's do this procedure. We didn't find anything. Let's do this. And so
Yeah, just matching up a prescription with a symptom and
Yes.
trying to tackle it that way.
Yes.
And so eventually I know that you fell into the world of functional medicine. How did that happen? How did you find out about that path?
So I was going to doctor and specialist to specialist, and my mom, who grew up really healthy, and again, I was never the sick kid. And she, at that point in my life, my mom was living in Santa Barbara and I was in Austin. And I remember she came to just kind of like help me with stuff, like clean my apartment. And I was kind of telling her like, Mom, I'm not feeling good. You know, I'm not able to work. Like my mom was just like, this is not you. Like, what is going on? You know? And when she came to see me, she was like, I realized just how bad you were. Like I would take naps in my car before I would walk upstairs to my apartment. Like that's how tired I was. It was not normal. So my mom was the one advocating for me to go see kind of one of these naturopath, doctor, whatevers. And I was like, that's hocus pocus. That's woo woo. I don't believe in that. There's no evidence behind that. But I was also desperate. So I was like, fine, what do I have to lose? What are they going to tell me, to change my diet? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so anyway, she ended up finding a functional medicine doctor, an MD at that point in Austin. And she did all this testing. She was asking me about like, were you sick when you grew up? Did you have strep throat? Did you get the HPV vaccine? I mean, she went through all these different things that I'm like, I don't know. What does that have to do? I'm sick now. I wasn't sick then. But she kind of like tied all the pieces of the puzzle together. She changed my diet, my lifestyle. She finally had answers. You know, she was like, you have parasite overload and you have heavy metal toxicity. My mercury was off the charts. And so she was able to give me answers finally. And that's when I was just like, I went all in. I was like, I'll change my diet. I'll do anything. And I was able to get off all my medicine, and which I think there are times and places for medicine. I'm not trying to be prideful and say, but I was thankfully able to get off, and I felt good. I had my life back, my energy, and I was good. And I was convinced. I was like, this just like saved my life and changed my life.
Yeah, that's amazing. And no other doctor, I'm sure, had run those same types of tests as she did.
Yeah, and if anything, they'd be like, well, we don't really know. And she had so many answers, which was such a blessing. And it literally changed my life so much so that I was like, I need to do this. Like, I need to figure out how I can help people in the way that I've been helped. And so I went back to go get like a nutrition certification, and I ended up being Amy Myers. She's a New York Times bestselling author and medical doctor. And I was her nurse at her practice for years. And I ended up going back to Nurse Practitioner school because I'm like, I want to help people heal how I did. You know, I felt amazing. I was off these prescriptions. I had changed my diet, gotten rid of chemicals. I was mindful of what I was putting on my body. And this is back in 2013 when it wasn't like super cool.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it just changed my life and changed the trajectory of my career. And I, you know, opened a wellness center and started my private practice after I became a nurse practitioner, and life was good. I was like, I'm able to help people in the way that I was healed. And I really believed in it, because not just changed my life, but I started seeing it change thousands of others people's lives.
That whole body approach, finally like solving issues instead of just masking symptoms. So that all happened about 12 years ago. Things were good. You had a thriving practice, a family, husband, 2 kids. And then about 2 years ago, you were given curveball when you were gifted a preventative cancer scan that ended up discovering a brain tumor. Tell us about that moment that you were diagnosed with a brain tumor. Where were you and what did that feel like?
It was almost 2 years ago, which is crazy, in a few weeks. And we were on a family vacation. I had done my preventative full body scan and I didn't think anything of it. You know, I'm like, I have a baby I'm nursing at the time, and I have a 3-year-old. And we were at the beach in Texas, and I was breastfeeding my son on the beach. It was just a normal day, and it started raining, and we were like, well, we have a bunch of kids. We were with the cousins, which was such a blessing. My mom, my sister were there. And we were like, let's take the kids to the aquarium. We got energy to burn. And so we were on the way to the aquarium, and I got an email that basically said your Pernuvo scan results are ready. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. You know, like I have no symptoms. I'm not like worried about anything. I'm just excited to learn so that I can share with the world and share with my patients. And I'll never forget, I opened up the app and everything's either green, yellow, or red. And there was a red thing and it said like abnormal finding with like an exclamation mark. And I remember feeling like, what the heck? And no one had called me or anything. And so I'm just open up the app and I see like, I don't even remember exactly what I saw first, but I remember just reading everything really quickly, and we're driving to the aquarium and I'm like, oh my gosh, they found a brain tumor. And I look at my husband, and you know me, I'm like the biggest jokester ever. And so my husband's like, no, you're kidding. And I'm like, no. And so I'm scrolling and I'm like, oh my God, there's a picture. Like this does not take anyone to like,
Oh my gosh.
even if you're not a radiologist, you look at my brain scan, which you probably have seen at this point. I don't know if you have, but it's a huge white mass. Like it does not take a trained eye to look and be like, that's not normal. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck? Didn't know what to make of it. I didn't know what to think of it, but the differential diagnosis, which is a list of what it could be, it said lymphoma, metastatic disease, glioblastoma, oligodendroglioma, astrocytoma, basically this whole list. And a lot of it I didn't understand at the time. But I know what a glioblastoma is, and that's like one of the scariest types of cancer you can get. I mean, people sometimes make it months, maybe a year. Sometimes people don't make it 2 years. And so my stomach, I was so sick to my stomach. I immediately called the company trying to get on the phone with somebody. They're like trying to find people that are practitioners. And so, it was scary. And I felt like life just stopped because I'm like, what just happened? And I think the craziest part about this whole story is that I never had symptoms. So I was also in denial because I'm like, this isn't me. And then I'm going through my mind. I'm like, okay, vision, hearing, balance, personality, memory, seizures, headaches, nothing. I've never even had a headache in my life at this point. So I'm like, this is not me. Like a little bit of denial, but a little bit of shock. And like, is my life over? Like, am I going to make it to next year? So it was
right. I can only imagine
scary.
how shocking and jarring that must have been. And I remember you even saying you thought like this has to be someone else's scan. Like
Yeah.
there has to be a mistake because like you said, you had no symptoms and typically people do have symptoms at that
Right.
point. So I know that there were a lot of people, including first and foremost yourself, who were shocked to find out that you had a brain tumor when you announced that you had a brain tumor. But I also know that it all kind of makes sense to you now because even though you were healthy, there is a lot more to how brain tumors form and how that works. Can you walk us through that?
So I think, and even to this day, people that, like, I had already had an Instagram and a blog and a thriving practice and wellness center at this point in my life. And so people kind of look to me as like someone that can give health advice. And I think it was like the whole world was shocked, including me. Like, I'm like, what? I have a brain tumor? But what I've learned, and even what my traditional, neurosurgeon and oncologist have said, is that it usually takes years for these tumors to form. And so I was told that it had likely been there 8 to 10 years. Well, if you look back at my health timeline, that is when I was really sick. And so basically my immune system was suppressed, come to find out, and what we know a lot, I had Lyme disease, and I want people to hear me say this, just because you've been diagnosed with these things does not mean you're going to get a brain tumor. There's a lot of fear, but it was the perfect storm in my story. I had gut issues, I had Lyme disease, I had mono at this time when I was really sick, thyroid issues. I had the perfect storm and my immune system was suppressed. And that is what allowed these, abnormal cells to keep mutating and growing. And I also went through a lot of trauma at this point in my life, which also suppressed my immune system. People don't talk enough about how the body and how trauma, it's not just something that affects us mentally, it's physically, the body keeps the score. And so my story was just the perfect timeline. These abnormal cells started to mutate and grow, and then tumor formation. And there's something called the cancer cascade, and it's like the perfect storm. And we actually all, at any given point in time, have circulating tumor cells, cancer cells, and basically our immune system, the way that God designed our body is that it goes and takes care of those abnormal cells. But when your immune system is suppressed and it can't do what it's created to do, they get out of control, and then it takes years for tumors to form and then for people to become symptomatic. So by the time someone finds a tumor, it's been years in the making, right? It's not just like this happened overnight. And that was my story. And when people told me 8 to 10 years, I'm like, I didn't know a lot about cancer at that time because this is all new to me, but I was able to look back and say, oh, that's exactly when I was really sick. And it had been growing since then. Now, I think the question too is like, would I have become symptomatic? I don't know. Did it stop growing because of my lifestyle? And I never would have known if it weren't for this incidental thing. I don't know. And I don't have the answers. I'm not God, but I'm just grateful we found it the way that we did and was able to take action.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about what you did do in your whole treatment protocol. But first, I want to know what conventional cancer care gets wrong. Like, walk us through why you decided to not go the conventional route with your treatment.
The conventional cancer route is surgery, chemo, radiation, immunotherapy, sometimes some different clinical trial drugs and things like that. And I am not against traditional oncology. I think it definitely has its times and places for certain types of cancer. But where I think our medical system and the oncology system as a whole is getting it wrong is no one's asking the why question. Like, why did this cancer occur? And what can we do to change the body to create an environment where cancer can't live in, and that's why recurrence is so high, is you see someone go into remission and they're healed and they ring the bell, and then 2 to 5 years later, it comes back and it might be in a different organ. And I'm not negative and I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I'm just trying to be real and say that, like, if you don't address why the cancer occurred in the first place, then of course it's going to come back. You have to change the entire terrain of why the cancer occurred in the first place and address any pathogens, the immune system, unresolved trauma, exposure to certain things. And so that's where I think our cancer system gets it wrong. I'm not against all conventional treatment. I mean, heck, I had brain surgery. That's a very conventional intervention. I had surgery a year ago, or last year and a half. But yeah, they don't ask the why question, and they don't try to prevent recurrence.
Yeah. And
they just are focused on kill, kill, kill.
Right. And I think that's so evident in just the increase in cancer rates. I mean, there's more awareness than ever, yet we are not seeing an improvement. And in fact, we're seeing the opposite.
And more funding.
Yes.
Like we have
more and more dollars being spent
funding,
on, yes.
But the rates are off the charts.
Yeah. And even in the last 4 years, I think there's been a massive increase in cancer rates in young people. What do you attribute that to?
I think it's kind of a perfect storm. And even with my story, I don't think it's just one thing. I really think it's multiple drops in the bucket. And what I mean by that is that this day and age, we have to work on our health. Like we have to be mindful of the products we use on our skin. We have to be mindful of what we eat. Our food supply is not the same. We're constantly inundated with EMFs and technology. Like we were never created to do that. We're all stressed and working at a pace of life that I don't think God created us to live at this pace at. The vaccine schedule changed in 1988 and a lot more vaccines were added to that. It's the perfect storm of all the chemicals, the toxins, our environment. But very little cancers actually are caused by genetic mutations. And there are cancers that do have genetic components.
What we
all
are
believe.
Told,
yes.
That cancer is almost entirely genetic, and that there's almost nothing we can do about it.
And then people feel doomed. And it's like, I just got these genetics. And I'm like, no, actually, you have the ability, it's called epigenetics, to change the expression of your genes through the lifestyle that you lead. Now, we're not God, we're not in control of everything, but there are things that we can do. And I feel like now more than ever, we have to make a conscious effort to take care of ourselves and advocate for ourselves and minimize our toxic exposure and fuel our bodies with healthy foods, because the government's not doing it. Our doctors, sadly, they're just not trained. I was trained through the same medical system. They just don't know,
The textbooks are outdated. The pharmaceutical companies have a big influence in what even goes into those textbooks. So there's definitely a lot wrong with the system. So what did you end up doing?
Yeah.
I know you have a whole care team. How did you piece that together? And what did that look like?
When I was first diagnosed, we were on our family vacation, which was a blessing. We were able to process. I mean, I'm like, what the heck? We were able to get in with a neurosurgeon 3 to 4 days later locally to get more advanced imaging to really look at what we thought it was. And he was basically like, it doesn't look like glioblastoma, but you have a huge tumor in your brain and it's a matter of time before you become symptomatic. But like, we don't have to do surgery tomorrow. This is a weird freak finding. He was like,
how big was the tumor?
It was the size of a plum when they took it out, which is huge. And I think a lot of people, they think a tumor is just sitting on your brain. It actually, the kind that I had, grows within your brain. So it invades healthy brain tissue. And so he basically was like, get your affairs in order. I mean, I was diagnosed September. It was my son's first birthday. It was Thanksgiving, Christmas, our wedding anniversary, my birthday, all within 3 months. And so it just felt like, oh my gosh, like this is a lot.
Were you pretty depressed? Were you hopeful? Were you kind of going back and forth between the two?
I look back and I could cry because I look back at stories and I'm like, and just pictures and things that I posted and I'm like, God just gave me supernatural faith and hope beyond my circumstances. Like it was not me. I like literally glory to God, because I think I was in go mode, because I was like, I'm going to live and I'm going to see my kids grow up and I'm going to fight. But I also just, by the grace of God, I just was able to get by one day at a time. And I had a lot of hard days. Like, of course I feared, like a song would come on and I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to be at my son's first dance? It was a really hard time and life slowed down and I really was able to focus on what mattered. But we also had to like execute a living will and find a surgeon and all these things. But I knew that the cancer didn't happen overnight. And I did a deep dive on integrative care. And I'd always known about Hope for Cancer, which is, an integrative holistic center in Mexico, which sounds so sketchy, but it's not. It's amazing. It's this Christian healing center. It's just so wonderful. So I knew, I was like, okay, it'd be awesome if we could shrink this brain tumor, Lord willing. But if not, at least I can prepare my body for surgery. And so I actually waited 5 months before surgery. Not everybody gets to do that. But again, because I wasn't symptomatic, it didn't feel like, I didn't want to rush into a decision in fear. And I did. I slowed down. I prayed. I did so much research and I found the perfect care team. So I went there for 2 weeks. I flew to California to go see Dr. Canali, who still is my doctor that, I call her the quarterback of my care team. I love her so dearly. She's oversees my care. She's just such a good voice of reason. And so I established care with her. I even changed my diet more. I went into more of a metabolic ketosis. and did all sorts of therapies. And that was 5 months leading up to surgery. And then I found a brain surgeon out in Arizona. And in those 5 months, we were actually able to shrink my brain tumor in half, which is truly a miracle. It's unheard of. Like, even people that do chemo and radiation may not even have a treatment response. So, I mean, yes. And there are some days where I'm like, I wish I just ate Whataburger and did nothing and like could just give all the credit and glory to God, which it is him at the end of the day, right? Like, but I really do think he's using my story to show people that like taking an integrative approach, like there is purpose to it, you know? And so, yeah, I was really grateful. And then I had surgery a year and a half ago, February 1st, 2023, to remove it.
And was anyone in your life skeptical about the approach you were taking, or was there anyone that discouraged you from going that route?
You know, no, not that anyone that spoke up. I'm sure people had those feelings and thoughts. Like, I'm sure people did that were close to us, but I think they trusted me enough to know that, like, okay. But some people, I did have a few people be like, you really need to get this out. This is really serious. And I'm like, I know. But I probably had this for a long time and I'm not symptomatic. And I also didn't want to walk around with a brain tumor in my head. Like, of course, every time I drove my kids, I'd be like, I don't want to have a seizure, you know, but no one really like butted heads with me. I think they just trusted me and knew that I was going to ultimately get surgery and I wasn't totally writing off conventional. But yeah, no one said anything to my face. Maybe a couple people were like, that's crazy. I don't know that I'd do that.
It's incredible that you were able to shrink your tumor in half by just utilizing natural and alternative therapies. And I know you mentioned you were in ketosis, deep ketosis for a lot of that time. What are some of the more like advanced biohacky alternative therapies that you used during that time?
Yeah, so I incorporated a lot. I'm trying to think like, what would a day of my life in treatment be like? And so I did ozone. I did a lot more frequent coffee enemas, rectal ozone.
What kind of ozone? Okay.
Rectal ozone. And then also I did EBU, which is like ozone on steroids. It basically filters your blood and ozonates it. I did that. I did something called endolaser. It's where you do IVs and you basically send laser frequency and light.
Wow.
I wore a red light helmet. For those of y'all that watched my journey, I kind of shared a lot of it and still have a lot of highlights on Instagram. It'd be like another day in my office with my red light helmet. I did molecular hydrogen oxygen therapy. Gosh, I still do take quite a bit of supplements, tons of supplements. And then sauna, I just upped my detox. Anything that helps support the immune system, high dose vitamin C, IV curcumin, IV artesunate. I mean, literally so many things. Red light bed, hyperbaric oxygen chamber, hyperthermia. So I did a lot. But I also, in addition to the herbs and all the therapies, I changed my diet. I did all the supplements. I did all the therapies. You know, I actually did a lot of emotional and trauma work because that's part of healing. And I had a lot of trauma in my life. And so just making sure that I was addressing that. What else did I do? Oh, I did repurpose off-label drugs and medications, which not a lot of people know about this, but there are FDA-approved drugs that are not approved for the purpose of certain cancers, but that can affect certain metabolic pathways. And so for me, like, I was on several, and I still am. I still do off-label drugs. So it's a drug that's approved, but it's just off-label for the purpose of why we're using it. And so,
and a lot of those will target parasites, right? And those aren't something that just any oncologist is going to prescribe.
No, they would actually think that's totally crazy.
Yeah.
And I still, you know, I'm on a fungal and a parasite protocol because we know that I had a huge parasitic and fungal load, which do stress and tax the immune system. And if I want my immune system to be optimal to fight off any abnormal cells, and that's the other thing people ask me too. They're like, well, you're cancer free? You don't have a tumor in your brain, but it's like the recurrence rate, even of what I had, is so high. And so I'm preventing recurrence and I am becoming even healthier. And I felt good, but my immune system, there was something that was hindering and suppressing. And then a lot of it's the Lyme and co-infections that I've had for years too.
Yeah. And I think you've mentioned this either in email or social, but the type of parasite that you had has actually been linked to brain tumors, even by the American Cancer Society.
Yeah. So there's something called, I had multiple parasites, but one of the parasites that we identified, I actually drew this on myself because, you know, I'm a provider. And so I'm like, I ran the whole test. And this is such a God thing that I found this out. But basically there's a parasite called Toxoplasma gondii that can cross the blood-brain barrier. And the International Journal of Cancer and the American Cancer Society link, when you have that positive in your blood, the antibodies, you're more likely to have a low-grade glioma. And that's exactly what I had. And it's young, middle-aged people. And so it's like, here's conventional treatment linking this. And even a lot of people don't know this, but EBV, Epstein-Barr virus, mono, that's actually a class 1 carcinogen. Like that is a known cause of cancer.
Wow.
So again,
I have EBV.
yeah. So,
A lot of
but you're
people do,
doing all
right?
the things. Yes. But it's like, you have to help support your immune system. And that's where ozone and all these supportive therapies come into play.
Is there one or a few things that you feel like made just by far the biggest impact on your healing out of everything you did?
You know, and it's the biggest question, the $1 million question of like, oh my gosh, what did Taylor do that shrunk her brain tumor? And even Dr. Keneally and I will never know, because we threw the whole kitchen sink at it. And I don't want to guess. I don't want to know. I'm just grateful that I am where I am. But one thing I can say is that after brain surgery, I really struggled with overstimulation. And I think I realized the value and importance of nervous system health, which is just a fancy word for managing your stress and being at peace, and just realizing, you know, like I owned 3 businesses at the time. And I think it was a crossroads in my life of just like, Taylor, just because you can do these things, should you? You know, and I think also when you're given a terminal diagnosis, I say that because I don't believe that, yes, it's life limiting for everybody and all that, but I choose to live my life like I am healed and I am going to live a long life, and mindset is important. But it was very humbling, and I was really faced with like, how do I want to spend my days? Do I want to spend them grinding, or do I want to have flexibility to make memories with my children and travel and go to treatment facilities? And so, decreasing my stress load was really, really big, especially after surgery. I didn't have a choice. When you're recovering from brain surgery, like sounds, lights, overcommitments, loud areas, airports, like it was just overload. And it was things that I've never struggled with. And so I feel like the biggest thing that I've taken away is that stress and nervous system health and trauma and emotional trauma can be really, really big in healing from any disease, whether it's autoimmune, cancer, whatever it may be. It's just important.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially like you mentioned, in this world, there is so much stimulation from devices, from artificial light, so many things like that everyone should be mindful of, regardless of whether or not you have a diagnosis. You mentioned that recurrence rate was really high for your particular type of cancer, and I think for a lot of types of cancers. What is the reason for that?
Because I think people just don't address why it occurred in the first place. You know, it kind of goes back to the terrain theory. You have to take care of the terrain in which the cancer grew in order to not prevent it to come back. Because if you just throw chemo and throw meds and radiation, then, you know, like you're not really resolving, you're killing it. But then some of those things, like, you know, there are certain cancer treatments like brain radiation. We know that radiation causes brain cancer.
Right.
And it's such a high dose. And so some of the treatments for cancer are actually some of the known carcinogens.
Causes of cancer.
Yeah, like tamoxifen, which I'm not saying it's bad. People need at times and places to shut down estrogen. But it's, you know, a lot of people are on tamoxifen, and that's a class 1 carcinogen. So we have to think like, what is worth it, and then what can we do harm with, you know? And so, yeah, even when I shared like, hey guys, I have no evidence of disease, like per my scans, and I still have clear scans, and I still will do scans for the rest of my life. Lord willing, they'll get further and further out. We don't have to do them as frequently. But even when I shared, like, I'm healed, I have no cancer, people are like, well, technically you still have leftover cancer cells, so you'll never be cured. And I'm like, well, I don't choose to live my life that way. I believe I'm healed. I have no evidence of disease. My scan says that, my doctor's in agreement, and I'm walking in that freedom and healing.
Do you think that if you would have kept going with all of the full plan, everything that you were doing, that you might have been able to completely shrink the tumor eventually and not have the surgery? Was that ever something you considered?
Yeah, you know, so here's the crazy thing is we actually didn't find out that the tumor had shrunk until after surgery, because I did a pre-op MRI like the day before surgery, so the surgeon could map everything and get clear margins and know exactly like blood vessels and everything. And I didn't find out that it had shrunk until like a week after brain surgery. I was getting all my medical records and reports. Wow. And so in my mind, I kind of view that like that was God's plan. I was supposed to get surgery, and I wasn't supposed to find out that it shrank. And honestly, we didn't think it was cancer. We knew that it was a brain tumor, but we didn't think that it was cancerous. And so I'm really grateful that I did get clear margins, because prognosis and statistics show that when you get it out, your survival rate is better. And so I don't know if it would have fully shrunk and resolved. It could have, but that wasn't my story. And I'm grateful for, I know, you know, and trust that the Lord has led me through all the steps, even brain surgery that was so hard, that I was supposed to have that as part of my story.
So I know your brain surgery was successful, but also I can imagine an extremely difficult thing to go through. And you were just mentioning to the crew offline that a chunk of your brain is actually missing now. So what has recovery looked like? And what has life looked like since brain surgery?
Yeah, I don't think anyone prepare you enough for a brain surgery. And you can't compare every case. They're not the same. You know, I was so fortunate. I was out of surgery and in recovery. And my husband, he said he'll never forget, he almost cried because I was talking, I knew where I was telling the nurses to get the catheter out. I'm like giving nurses orders or nurse practitioner orders. And, you know, I was so fortunate. I went to ICU, I got up and walked to the bathroom, and I'm a good patient, but I'm also like, I know what it takes to get well and get to a step down unit. And so I was like, I want to go to the bathroom. This is good. Get my bowels moving, you know? And so anyway, I went to the bathroom, and I was walking 6 hours after brain surgery, and I was discharged straight from ICU 24 hours later, which is also kind of unheard of. My surgeon is amazing. He has a little bit more or less invasive approach, and that's why I chose him in Arizona. But yeah, the recovery itself, I mean, and I didn't have to go to speech, OT, occupational, physical therapy. You know, some people have paralysis on one side. You know, there's a lot of variations of how someone can be after brain surgery. So all in all, limitations, I'm so blessed and everything's been intact, but I'd be lying if I said it's just been easy, and it's all good, because it's not. It's drastically affected my life. And, you know, I struggle with insomnia. I've never had sleep issues in my life. You know, we traveled last summer, and it was so hard for me to sleep, and overstimulation and sounds. You know, I had to start wearing headphones in public and traveling, and even with my kids, you know, I have 2 young kids, and the dog would bark, and I couldn't proofread, which is a huge part of my job. You know what I mean? Proofreading content. And yeah, so a lot of things felt overwhelming. But all in all, like, I can function on a day-to-day basis. I mentioned at the time, you know, I did own several businesses, and I was like, this is too much. I can't do this. You know, I have to heal. And they say the brain can take a year to heal, and that's pretty true and on par. I do pretty good. I do pretty dang good, and I'm so blessed. Really, yeah, most people don't know.
Never know.
Yeah.
Never. Unless having not known your story.
Yeah.
And what are some of the things that you're doing now to continue to support your nervous system? I know we've talked about it. We do a lot of the same things, but tell our audience what you do.
Grounding. Big fan of grounding. I notice a big shift, especially when I travel. Travel days are still hard for me. Just the lights, the sound, the airport. Whenever there's a lot going on, I have a hard time with my brain processing. Like, whenever there's a ton going on, it's just like, whoa, you know, like a kid's birthday party. I'm trying to watch my kids. And so I notice when I feel...
for any parent, for sure.
Really?
Especially, I can imagine, like...
See, and so many people say this. They're like, welcome to my everyday life. Like,
I think you were just running at such a high octane. I mean, and you still are, but you're just so smart and so full of energy, so vibrant, that for you, I know you say, like, you know, that you've gone down maybe a few levels with certain things, but I feel like you've probably just, like, normalized a little bit.
I've leveled out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as far as, like, the nervous system, I will say grounding is so big for me. That's the first thing I do when I fly. It is like, if I can get to water, like a river, a creek, that's amazing. You know, if I can be at the beach, the sand, the ocean, nothing resets me like that. But day to day, you know, just grounding, getting morning sunlight, getting sunshine and fresh air, taking what I call brain breaks. You know, my team, like, we'll be on a big team meeting. I'm like, I'll see y'all on Slack later. I'm going to take a brain break. I'll go lay on my higher dose PEMF mat, and just really calming. I love baths are really grounding, you know, with Epsom salt, magnesium sulfate, and yeah, just really trying to disconnect too. That's really big for my brain. I feel like this day and age, we're all connected, whether it's phones and apps and emails. And so for me, just to have some time to disconnect is, oh, and then let us not forget my favorite thing ever, reflexology. I have my girl back home who I've been seeing. I've actually saw her almost weekly for 2 years prior to my diagnosis. It was like an intuitive thing, I guess. I mean, I saw her weekly during pregnancy, and I just kind of kept on, and my son's now 2.5, and I love her, and she's changed my life. And so anytime I'm feeling overwhelmed, or it's a big work week, or we've been traveling a lot, the first thing I do is go see my girl.
That's great.
And she gives me a massage, yeah.
And I know you have your girl here now, too.
Oh, yeah. I have my girl here that I found out from trips.
Times in the last year or so. Now I've started going to her, so.
And she's good,
right?
It's not the fancy spa, but it gets the job done.
Yeah, it does, yeah. How do you ride the line between obsessing over preventing any reoccurrence and just being aware?
So this is a good question, and something I feel like I'm still learning. I haven't perfected it. And honestly, I'm not big on perfection anyway, because if you're trying to be perfect, you're probably stressed and trying to control everything. But I was definitely much more motivated at first before surgery. And again, I just was in go mode. Like, we got to get this done. I'm going to live a long life. It was like battle mentality. Like, I'm a warrior and I'm going to do this. And then I was really disciplined after surgery, and it got to a point, it was about last summer, that I was like, okay, I'm learning this is not a sprint, this is a marathon, and this is my life, and I'm gonna have to have a sustainable pace, you know? And so last summer I wasn't in perfect ketosis and checking my GKI and my blood sugar. And you know what? I decided, you know what? I'm going to go travel with my family. And we still eat clean when we travel. It's not perfect, but we're making memories, and that's medicine too. And so I kind of had to let go of that last summer. I'm still disciplined and do a lot of my therapies, but you know, there are days where I don't take my supplements, and that is okay. And I just start back the next day, and I don't feel bad or guilty or shameful that I do that. And I think we've done a lot of trips and a lot of travel, and that's been medicine and healing for us too, even if it doesn't mean wearing my red light helmet every day. And I feel like I'm passionate about prevention and I'm motivated, but I'm also not a slave to it, and it's not my identity and something that controls me.
What about if someone is going through conventional cancer treatment and maybe they feel like that's their only option for whatever reason, or maybe it is their only option? How can they still advocate for themselves, even seeing like a traditional oncologist and going that route? What are some things that they can still do to support healing?
Yeah. So I think it depends on where someone is in their cancer journey. Are they on a surveillance? Are they in remission? And are they just getting scans? Which that is me right now. I still see a neuro-oncologist and a neurosurgeon. You know, I'm not like, peace out, I'm out, you know. And it's really important to maintain those relationships. I think some people go left field and they're like, I'm never going to do a scan. I'm never going to follow up. And I'm like, no, you need them. You need to maintain that relationship. I mean, everyone needs to do what they have peace about and what their doctors say. You're advocating for yourself, but also there's an expert that can order scans. But it depends on, and if you're in the thick of treatment, I would definitely recommend, and there are times and places for conventional treatment. Like, hear me say that, you know, there are certain types of cancer that respond amazing, certain types of breast cancer that respond well to treatment, lymphoma, you know what I mean? So I'm not saying don't do that, but maybe find someone that can talk to you about diet and nutrition and what integrative therapies. You know, I have several mom friends in Fort Worth that unfortunately are all young moms that have breast cancer, and they've all done chemo and surgery, but they've also gone to Dr. Keneally in Irvine and done all the integrative stuff. And even if they're doing conventional treatment, they can still do ozone and high-dose vitamin C and coffee enemas to minimize side effects of their treatment and to support their body going through it. And so I would just say find a provider or a cancer advocate. Naisha Winters, who is amazing and wonderful, she's who referred me to my surgeon. She has a book called The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, and she has a whole list and directory of cancer advocates that can help you.
Okay, yeah, so I can see how it would be so important for someone to seek out additional information and additional opinions even when going through conventional treatment. I mean, I have just heard horror stories from people who have gone through cancer themselves or have a child that is going through treatment, and they're spending a lot of time in like the cancer wing of the hospital, and just there's like bowls of candy around, and oncologists are telling them it doesn't matter what types of foods you're eating, just that you're getting calories in, which is nuts. Because you'd shared something with me about what happened, like when they scan for cancer, they actually have you drink. Is it drinking a sugary drink? Or talk to us about
this.
This
is interesting, and I have never done chemo or radiation, so I can't speak to an actual treatment floor. And actually, a lot of brain cancer patients will do. Some will do infusions, but some will do oral chemo. They take at home, a pill. But I've had so many friends, you know, and warriors text me like, I can't believe that they're serving this. This is the tray that they go around at the cancer treatment center, and it's like Cheez-Its and granola bars and Skittles, and it's just, to me, it's just sad. You know, I feel like it's like, what the heck? And I get it, and I have compassion, and I can't say that I know what it's like to go through chemo and not have an appetite. Like, I have compassion for people, but I'm like, let's get some creative ways of how you can get nutrients in that can fuel you. But yeah, so when most people ask their oncologist, like, well, does sugar affect cancer? And some will say yes, especially in the brain world. A lot of even like traditional neurosurgeons, neuro-oncologists are saying, yeah, there is a connection and ketosis can be helpful, but we're not sure. There's not enough data, and I don't know. I just don't know that that's being shown. But with that being said, it's not hard for me, and I don't want to argue with anyone, but it's not hard to present the case that the way that someone does a PET scan is you literally drink a sugar solution, and then cancer is like Pac-Man. They eat up the sugar first. And so when they do the scan, you see the places in the PET scan that light up, and which shows that it just absorbs the sugar. And so to me, I'm like, it doesn't take this like really outside the box thinker to know that like, well, if it's taking up sugar, wouldn't that mean that's its food source?
Sugar. Right.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, seems very obvious, but maybe not to everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, you have also said in the past that cancer is not a death sentence, which I love. But what would you say to anyone who is struggling with a cancer diagnosis right now and maybe feels like it is a death sentence? First
of all, I just want to say I'm sorry. Like, I've been there. I'm not coming and talking to you from a place of you should do this, you shouldn't do this. I'm opinionated. I've been there, and I'm just sorry. Like, it's really, really hard. And there are times where I do grieve what my life looked like, and I do fear. You know, I would be lying if I said that everything's rainbow and butterflies and I have faith and hope every single second of every single day, because that's just not the case. Like, it just comes in. I'll see a picture and I'm like, oh my gosh, there are these moments that trigger you, you know? And so what I will say is grieve the life that you thought you were going to have. And it's okay to be sad and it's okay to be scared, but don't stay there and don't be stuck there. Continually renew your mind, have hope. I don't know what that looks like for everybody. For me, the Lord has given me hope beyond my circumstances, and this world is not my home, and there's a lot of sickness and brokenness, and I can't wait for heaven one day, but I want to live here and now for my kids. And so I would say, you know, just, you do have to affirm yourself, and you do have to tell yourself that you can heal because your body's listening. And I think one of the hardest things is that, you know, you get a diagnosis, whether it's finding a lump or getting a brain scan like me, and then, oh my gosh, I can't even, like, I can remember because I know, but the pit in my stomach, the fear, it was so crippling, the anxiety, you know, I remember what that felt like. And so that you're scared, you go to the doctor, they tell you you have cancer. So now this is spoken over you and you start to believe it, and you associate cancer with death, and then you start treatment and you start losing your hair. And then you really are identifying with like death and cancer. And I'm not saying that mindset's going to carry you, but I think that it really is so, that is so powerful. And resolving emotional trauma in your life, that is so significant, you know, going to great measures to heal, but you can heal. And I'm not saying that we're God and we can control everything, but I do believe there's a lot we can do to either mitigate treatments, side effects, or, you know, Lord willing, beat it, taking an integrative approach.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good advice. We are going to switch gears to end this to a little bit of a lighter note with some this or that questions.
Love it.
Ready?
Let's do the fun stuff.
Okay, let's do it. All right. This or that, eggs or bacon?
Bacon.
Veggie burger or grass-fed beef?
Grass-fed beef all day long, double beef, baby.
Mocktail or cocktail?
Mocktail.
Hyperbaric chamber or EBU?
Ooh, that's hard. I've done so much hyperbaric, but I'm claustrophobic lately, and so I would have to say EBU.
Okay. Loungewear or dressing up?
Loungewear all day.
Resistance training or power walks?
Resistance training.
Cold plunge or infrared sauna?
I'm a sauna girl.
Gua sha or facial cupping?
Gua sha.
All right, love it.
That was hard. Those are all my favorite things.
You answered them so quickly. I know.
I'm decisive.
I was trying to stump you.
I'm decisive.
But it didn't work. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Taylor. You are such a light to the world and have helped and encouraged so many people, and you continue to do so on all of your platforms. Where can people follow along with you and also purchase your amazing wellness products?
Yeah, so you're sweet. I have a website. I'm so passionate about educating people, and I was before cancer. It's just a different topic that I focus on now. But website, TaylorDukesWellness.com. I have an online store with a lot of protein, electrolytes, supplements.
The best stuff. I love the lemonade.
We just got carried away chatting. We got bone broth protein.
Bone broth protein, the chocolate and vanilla ones.
Yes.
So good. The electrolytes are amazing. I love the coffee creamer.
You're so sweet. We got coffee. But yeah, so that's shop.TaylorDukesWellness.com. And then I share a lot on my Instagram at TaylorDukesWellness. And yeah, I'm on the interwebs.
Yeah, check her out. She's a good one to follow along with.
Yeah, so for any of y'all listening today, you guys can get a 15% off discount code to anything on our store using the code Primally Pure.
Thanks for coming on, Taylor.